name is Grace, and my topic will be music and morality, examining the musician's role in today's culture. In 1985, there was a series of public hearings that saw the PMRC and a panel of popular musicians, one of them Dee Snider, debating over the use of tipper stickers on CDs that contain explicit lyrics. This is because parents think that bands like Dee Snider's Twisted Sister are a bad influence and the cause of moral degradation amongst their children. In fact, many bands and musicians in the past have been put to blame for public violence. A very famous example is Marilyn Manson's case, where he was attacked and accused for being the main influence of a Columbine shooting by two teenagers which took 12 lives. These events raise questions like, should musicians and their music be held responsible for public violence? Should music ever adhere to a moral code? The objectives of this paper is to closely examine the perspectives of society towards the moral standing of musicians and their music, to find out the musical or non-musical constituents that make up moral or immoral music, and finally aim to deduce the responsibility of musicians in the eyes of today's society. I want to collect and present the views hosted by listeners and musicians themselves on the fine line between art and morality through the analysis of sample public hearings as well as articles and journals from reporters and critics. Most of my findings show that majority believes that artists shoulder the same responsibility as his fellow men in creating music, but further research seems to point to the growing acceptance of music that is controversial and challenges the ethics of today's society. In the ancient times, philosopher Plato in his book Republic mentioned how he found music to be powerful and beneficial, yet very threatening and dangerous. He proposed sending artists out of the Republic, or at least have art severely censored to protect citizens from indecent material. Plato thinks that music should only ever be moral, and if it isn't, should be kept to a minimal exposure. There are, however, people who have a different perspective towards music. James Donkin, in an article for CNN, empathized with heavy metal for being blamed for public violence. He expressed that the society is only using bands with more controversial settings as a scapegoat to distract from the real societal problems surrounding violence today. Alice Cooper, supporting this view, added that there's more blood in Macbeth than in his shows. This view questions why music are to be blamed for the minority that decides to act upon indecent works that are clearly fictional. So with all these different opinions, what should a musician today do? Most of my literature findings advocate musicians to uphold their moral responsibility when creating art because art is a powerful messenger. It shouldn't aim to upset the status quo, but aim to improve the society instead. There is, however, one article in particular that thought different. Carol Becker stated that art is to critique the present, unsettle minds and encourage critical thinking. My research will further these findings and observations. The basis of the idea that music has the power to inform, change and move a society is based on a very simple observation that art is communication. This statement underlines the significance morality has in art. As Greg Downs put it, what we put forth as entertainment will have a direct effect on society. The cause and effect of musicians and their music are apparent in many ways, such as fashion, sexuality, and language. We could see how the Beatles made mod-style suits so desirable in the 60s. The wave of feminism would not have been as fierce without feminist anthems like Respect performed by Aretha Franklin. Today, the majority of the top singles on Billboard charts endorse profanity, and we can see that offensive language has been very casually adopted in this generation's daily conversations. The examples given tell us how art is indeed a powerful tool of communication. Thus, musicians do have to uphold their moral obligations as they create. If music is so influential towards the society's behavior, why create indecent, immoral, destructive music at all? That seemed like a checkmate remark, but there are a group within the society that is ready to answer it. In the 1900s, an art movement called Expressionism took place. It is a style in which the artist attempts to depict the rather subjective emotions and responses that objects and events arouse in him. These emotions and responses could include the bad, which explains the exaggeration, distortion, and jarring applications. A viewer will understand that the piece of painting is to convey a certain story or emotion. It also allows interpretation and imagination, way beyond the intention of the artist himself. This supports the view that an artist is not equivalent to his art. The concept could be similarly applied to music because music is essentially art. Some people see music as expression, as theatrics, and more understandably as fictional entertainment. Should an art be immoral, it does not necessarily represent the artist. While it's true that musicians are at a place of influence and should never abuse his power, part of society thinks that they should not be held responsible for the moral degradation of the society. Plays, literatures, and films have been depicting violence since their conception, and an aware person will understand that he cannot mimic everything he sees or hears because some are obviously wrong, unlawful, or just merely fantasy. Music undeniably has a certain degree of influence towards an individual's character, but morality should always come from a secure principle of values within the individual himself, cultivated from his parental or religious upbringing and understanding of the law, not from a few lines of music heard from a pop song. To understand what society expects from musicians, first we have to know how morality in music is gauged. Most may refer to style, imagery, artist persona, and even basic musical elements like modes and harmony to measure morality in music. Unfortunately, the measuring of moral music is emotional or to be felt. Hence, judgments are subjective and not credible. A more delicate listener may find punk and rock offensive, the language very harsh, and the deportment trivial. But some associate it with freedom, fearlessness, grit, and they find a sense of belonging. Furthermore, women dancing provocatively can be ignorantly categorized as immoral. But are not Beyoncé's motivational songs about strong, independent females paired with a couple of erotic moves and hot pants too? Even basic musical elements like modes and scale patterns are subjected to evaluation. Plato dismissed the Lydian and Ionian modes because according to Greek harmonia, they promote sloth and drunkenness. He only approved of the Dorian and Phrygian modes. According to him, the Dorian mode is suitable for a brave man who is engaged in warfare, while the Phrygian is suitable for a man engaged in works of peace. He would have been outraged if he heard the C major scale, which is closest to the Ionian mode, is the first thing a music student would learn in a music school today. I observed that the interpretation of morality depends on the generation, culture, and environment the listener resides in. Osho, in his book Moral, Immoral, Amoral, defined morality as a set of values based on a contemporary understanding that unifies us as human beings beyond the divisions of religion, nations, and race. The word contemporary signifies that morality is relative to time, constructed according to the norms and practices of the then society. This means that the parameters defining morality will always change. This ambiguity makes it even more difficult to determine the musician's moral and social responsibility in today's culture. Whether it is intentional or not, society often imposes a series of expectations on artists and the art that they see and how it should function in the world. The Chicago Arts Archive sought for public opinion on the artist's role and responsibility via online comments on the website. Anna Kunz, an educator, responded by saying that it is important for an artist to inspire, encourage, validate, and question creative thinking in others. Adding to a comment is an artist called Paul Brandon, who said that his main responsibility as an artist is to be honest. There are two responsibilities to his audience. Not only must he remain honest to himself, but he must continue to give them honest work, no matter the subject matter. The last comment that I collected was by Adam Grossi, who in contrast was more revolutionary than the others. He claimed that his responsibility as an artist is to keep creating conventions to facilitate progress, and then to challenge those conventions when they start to seem stale. It is interesting to note that most who respond are musicians or artists, which indicate that it is not merely the society expecting a certain responsibility, but the artists themselves being aware that they have certain obligations as people with a voice. With this, we can dismiss the idea that an artist has no social moral responsibility. During the public hearing before Congress, Snyder hinted that censorship is the musician's duty. While it is unfair to hold a musician liable for the immoral conduct of the public, Snyder implied that it is fair to expect a musician to write things he believes in, things in tune with his personal principles and values that he can stand behind too. To him, this is as far as a musician's responsibility goes. The perspectives and demands of society could change the function of music and musicians as a whole. We could see that the criteria that makes up moral music evolves as time and human intellectual evolve. A musician's responsibility in today's culture will perhaps never be defined in terms of what he should or should not do. But it is safer to say that an artist's responsibility is not creating moral art, but be a moral person in his time regardless of the art he creates.